logical one I had no way of knowing without the real estate signs up and had no reason to question it. My neighbor had moved out. Plain and simple. When I went to bed that night, it had pretty much entirely left my head. My bedroom window faces out towards my neighbor's house. For the 2 weeks I had been watching television from my bed. It was how I went to sleep. Just confusedly staring in wonder. Slightly disturbed knowing I could be looking at the back of the head of my dead neighbor. And since I had been staring at that television for the last 2 weeks, it took a few minutes to register the horror when I crawled into bed and looked at the television, still on across the street. I didn't sleep very well. Every night, for about a month and a half, I'd just see that television. During the day it was on. I'd walk up to the house when I was feeling more adventurous, and knock on the door, but nobody answered. I stayed smoking quite a bit in lieu of proper sleep. Every night, I'd walk by the house, curious, scared and confused. I contacted the realtor and asked if they were giving tours, and she said they were not, so it didn't get turned on during same open house. I thought maybe I was hallucinating, that the television was never on, but the officer definitely went over and turned it off, so it had absolutely been on, at least in the first place. I invited a friend over 2 weeks ago, and after a little hanging out I told him the story and asked, straight-faced and horrified, if the television was on. He said that it was. He was clearly concerned for my health, and I don't blame him. So the only other option I could think of was that maybe a squatter had taken up residence in the vacant home. It wasn't common in the area. As far as I knew, there's very little crime or homelessness in the suburban area I live in. So it didn't really make any sense for somebody to squat here, but it was all I could think of. Last night, I worked up the courage to confront this squatter. I was going to call the police, but assuming the squatter had been there when I first called, I doubted it would do anything to tell them again. I worked it out in my bead that as long as somebody else was living in that house illegally, it wasn't so bad for me to walk over and enter uninvited myself. Stupidly, I worked up this courage while smoking a cigarette late at night, where the only light out was the light pollution over to the east in Chicago and the dim light of the street lamps. Shaking, both from the terrible cold weather we'd been having lately and from the nervousness taking over. I opened the door. I was hoping the door was locked so I could back down on my sudden wave of courage and walk away without feeling like I was just running off with my tail between my legs. To my surprise and dismay, the door was not locked. I felt briefly confused, wondering why the realtor hadn't put in a lock like they did when I sold my house. But I realized that if was somebody squatting here, then it shouldn't come as a surprise that there wasn't exactly airtight security. Slowly, timidly, I walked towards the dining room. I could hear the faint murmur or infomercials and see the moving lights and colors of the screens shine as I tiptoed, trying to make as little noise as possible. My whole body went cold as I entered the room. There was my squatter, a middle-aged woman, wrinkly, gray-haired and dressed like a homeless person. It at least added up. I was more horrified of the fact that I had to now confronted them than at the woman herself. I stuttered a scared hello and she looked at me, and before I could form a thought she screamed the most hellish, horrifying scream I's ever heard. It was not the scream of a middle-aged woman. It was demonic, deep and ear-splitting. I froze up and my heart sank and my eyes widened and I stared, accepting that I was going to die at this screaming woman for what seemed like eternity. It was an unwavering scream. It didn't sound like she was losing her breath, after what had to have been a whole minute, the moment the initial wave of shock wore off, I just turned and ran. She hadn't moved save for turning to look at me as she screamed, and I looked to make sure she hadn't gotten up to follow me out, and she had not. I ran to my house. I considered calling the police, but I didn't want to explain his situation or risk getting myself into legal trouble for trespassing on my neighbor's property. And if they went there and again did not find the squatter, there was no question that I'd be seen as completely insane. I lay awake refusing to look across the street at the television screen, and my thoughts raced. Surely it had to have just been a squatter. She looked like one. She was clearly living in a house that wasn't hers. She was probably a mentally unstable homeless woman. I decided the scream couldn't have been as awful as I had thought. It was all just the makings of a scared mind. I actually managed to get some sleep, shockingly enough, and when I woke up I briefly didn't even remember what had happened the night before. What I woke up to was somewhat odd. My cat always sleeps downstairs in the living room on the sofa, but I found him, wide awake. In all my years living here, I never woke up with him in my room. I pet him for a little and went downstairs. As I began remembering the events of the previous night, I decided to go out for a cigarette, and on my way out, I found that my front door had been unlocked. I ran through last night in my head, and I remembered vividly my frantic run home ending in me making sure all my doors were locked. My memory is very rarely faulty. I felt my stomach churn and my heart sink, and I felt a chill as I walked back upstairs to go low my living room. What I found would have been entirely mundane in any other setting. My television set was on. I called the police to explain the situation. I called out of work and am spending the next few days in my friend's home with my laptop and my cat.
One night during the summer of 2001, my friend and I witnessed the late-night activities of a glowing, white sphere of light on my family's farm. That night, my friend was staying over. He was 14, and I was 16, and one of us decided that we should take a walk around a bit of my family's property. The night air was warm, so we headed outside with my terrier at our heels. It was about 10 p.m., and my friend, my dog, and I were following a circular path which led past some relatives' houses, alongside a rural highway, and through some fields, before leading back home. We'd only been walking for about 5 minutes before we're approaching the 2-lane road that ran through the property. We began to pass my great-uncle's house on our right, and we were about to follow the trail to the left which tracked the road, but I saw something strange approaching from the other side of the silent highway. It was white, and it was moving steadily and smoothly, but not necessarily quickly. As it got closer, I saw that it was a glowing ball of light. It was about the size of a basketball, floating about 3 feet off the ground, and glowed white, but it didn't cast any light on its surroundings. It crossed the road toward us, but to our right, and started weaving around the few pine trees my uncle had in his front yard. I nudged my friend and asked if he was seeing what I was seeing. Suddenly, the orb stopped moving when it noticed us, and we were definitely noticing it. We were pretty close, at maybe 50 feet, but we couldn't watch for long because my dog saw it too, and she started yapping, and ran after the thing. As my dog got closer, the ball of light went back in the direction it came, but it moved much faster this time. My dog chased it across the road and into the woods, and I lost sight of them. My friend and I just looked at each other and ran straight back to my house. My dog was right behind us as we were getting to my door, So she had lost her quarry in the woods. I've seen ball lightning as well. Bad storm one night at age 12, heat lightning the next night. Skies were dry, though just went to bed around 8 p.m. almost asleep. Eyes were closed. Sudden flash with no sound, bright as the sun for an instant. Booming thunder follows, house shakes like an earthquake. Instinct is to run to mom's room, open the door to hallway. What can only be described as a ball of fucking plasma, as I know it today, is moving slowly down the hallway. Watch in awe. Maybe less than 5 seconds it takes to get to the dining room. Bounces, I don't know how else to describe it, into the living room, too scared to follow it. But by then parents are fully awake from my yelling. Smell of burnt copper, metallic sort of taste in my mouth. Fire alarm is blaring. Next thing I know, dad is running around the house with a fire extinguisher, opening all the windows. Mom is trying to comfort me, etc. Next day, all the electronics were fried in a certain area. TV, Laserdisc player, VCR, sound system, where it apparently dissipated while going back up through the roof. Insurance covered the damage, and I don't know if insurance actually covers ball lightning, or an act of God, or what the fuck it was. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it though. I saw a ball of white light yesterday in a field. Was walking through the woods with friend, making trails for hunting next season, and just fucking off. Came to a field, and as we were walking across it, I decided to randomly turn around and look at the sky. It was a clear blue sky, and I thought I saw a balloon. I was like, WTF? How would a balloon get out here? Is that a bird? Or a plane? As I was thinking this, trying to see better and figure out what it was, it glowed out real fast. Light disappeared, but not immediately. Imagine turning an old light bulb out and it taking a sec to stop glowing completely. It was just gone. I told my friend who didn't see it, and we watched for a few minutes to see if it came back, but it didn't.
Felt I had to get this off my back to let at least someone hear it. Be me 2 years ago. Parents' own cabin in northern Saskatchewan. Yes, I am northern Connecticut. Fuck off. Decide I want to spend time by myself up there. Parents agree because they want me out of their attic. Been really into X past little while, so I found the idea of being by myself and isolated with whatever is out there in northern forest oddly comforting. Drive up there late November, stocked up on food to last a few months. Leave my phone at home since I only use it for internet related stuff. Cabin has electricity and a dish, no internet, but all my vidya are offline anyway. Bring rifle as well for hunting. Cabin has basic rectangular layout with an extension added on when my sister and I were vacations there. Mostly made out of wood except for tin roof on extension. Unpack my shit and chill when I show up. Cabin is really close to the tree line. Very small clearing it was built on. Others would find this claustrophobic. I find it comforting. Like I said, oddly relaxed when it comes to the vaguely threatening like X. First night I chill and listen to the sounds of animals as I fall asleep. No TV, just relaxing and settling into my new environment.